In recent years, names associated with the cartel world have frequently appeared in the news. Many have long been involved in organized crime networks, but others were very young when they entered. One prominent figure is Cesar Raúl Meza Torres, a teenager known as El Mini 6. He appeared on social media with a lifestyle that demonstrated his closeness to the cartel environment. Photos of him with weapons, vehicles, and other military-themed paraphernalia quickly made him a household name, especially among young people influenced by narco-corrido culture and the romanticization of the cartels. However, his story is not one of glory, but rather the brief journey of a cartel child who, from childhood, was surrounded by violence and crime. This video will explore how his environment, family, and life choices shaped Meza Torres's path, leading up to the events that ended his life at a very young age.
Cesar Raúl Meza Torres was born on October 31, 1991 in the city of Culiacán, Sinaloa province. Official documents record his birth a few months later in Cozalá on February 7, 1992. His family name is familiar in drug trafficking circles. His father, Raúl Meza Ontiveros, was widely known as El M6 and purportedly held a prominent position within the Sinaloa cartel. On his mother's side, Aida Elizabeth Torres Felix, the family line is also connected to cartel figures. Two of his uncles, Javier Torres Felix and Manuel Torres Felix, had similar reputations within the same network. With such a family background, Cesar's daily environment from childhood was surrounded by people who lived and worked for criminal organizations. Many of his close relatives faced tragic fates. Some were killed in security operations, others were victims of violence by other groups, and others were detained by law enforcement. Nicknames for Cesar varied. Some called him Raulillo or Raulito, diminutives of his middle name. The nickname El Mini 6 emerged as a direct reference to his father's name, marking his social standing and identity among the groups that knew him. It also signaled that he was seen as the heir apparent or continuation of the role his family played. Growing up, his social interactions mostly took place in the normal environment of children in his area, but two things stood out: access to resources not typically available to ordinary teenagers, such as luxury vehicles and weapons, and close relationships with influential figures in the cartel. Such an environment transformed his outlook and opportunities. The paths available to him differed from those of most children his age. Personal relationships also brought him further into the network. Among his friendships was a romantic relationship with Teresa Zambada Niebla, who was part of the Zambada family, a key clan within the Sinaloa cartel. This connection was not merely romantic. Socially and politically, these family connections strengthened networks and facilitated access to circles of power within the organization. Legally and administratively, Cesar's registered address indicates he resided in the Villa Satélite neighborhood of Culiacán. This record is significant because it reveals the geographic roots and social base that shaped his daily life. There, he associated with a peer group that largely grew up in the same context, among family loyalties, the influence of the illegal economy, and a local culture that often viewed status and violence as a source of respect. Formal education and the daily activities typical of adolescence were eroded by other realities: the presence of family members who were targets of operations, closed meetings, and exposure to a lifestyle that emphasized power and protection. All of these factors combined to shape his identity, an identity that ultimately guided his life choices as he entered adolescence.
As a teenager, Cesar's life choices became clearer. His fascination with the cartel lifestyle turned into direct involvement in the group's activities. He entered the Sinaloa cartel's structure as a young member entrusted with field duties. His involvement was documented in several official incidents. On October 9, 2007, traffic police stopped an armored vehicle without plates in the Las Cuentas neighborhood of Culiacan. The driver could not produce valid proof of ownership. As a result, authorities detained the young man inside the vehicle. He was with two other teenagers, Brian Raul Rodriguez Verdugo, then 14, and Jesus Ale Perez, then 17. Police records listed Cesar's address as via satellite, an administrative item that linked him to a certain social base in the city. Beyond his involvement in this traffic incident, Cesar's name was also linked to other, more serious incidents. On June 19, 2009, during an illegal street racing event in the same area, authorities arrived to stop the activity. As authorities approached, several armed men got out of their vehicles and opened fire on the officers. The perpetrators fled, leaving one car at the scene. Further investigation revealed that the vehicle was registered to Cesar. Inside, license plates matched those from a stolen vehicle report. Officers recovered various shell casings from the scene, among them ammunition for an FN-57, 5.7 by 28 mm pistol, 223 Remington, .38 Super, and .45 ACP rounds, indicating a weaponry pattern unusual for a typical teenager. One officer was injured as a result of the incident. Beyond official events, Cesar's activities were closely tied to the image he constructed online. His accounts on platforms like Facebook and Metroflog, as well as posts from friends, featured images of him with firearms, military-style uniforms, and luxury vehicles. These photos not only strengthened his online reputation, but also served as an indirect recruitment tool. Other young men imitated his poses, style, and status symbols. The circle of friends who supported his image strengthened his social standing among a peer group that saw the cartel as a shortcut to influence and livelihood. His role wasn't simply about bravado. Practical tasks required him to be involved in logistics, security, and small operations related to the movement of illicit goods. Constant exposure to such activities narrowed the distance between his adolescent identity and his role as a perpetrator. The law began to take a more serious look at him after a series of incidents, from arrests for masked vehicles to involvement in shootouts, signaled that his involvement had moved from image to action. However, whether due to peer pressure, a need for identity, or the access he had through his family, his step into the world of crime became a defining moment. These events became pivotal points that marked his escalation, from a teenager posing on social media to a figure involved in armed incidents that harmed the public and attracted the attention of law enforcement.
Early that morning, a police patrol in Zapopan noticed a suspicious-looking car in the Las Aguilas area, near the intersection of Sierra Tapalpa and Avenida 18 de Marzo. Officers stopped the vehicle for a routine inspection. Inside the car were two men, later identified as being from Sinaloa: Cesar Raul Meza Torres and his associate, Fidel Rojas Felix. When asked to get out and show identification, the two men reacted differently. They pulled weapons from their vehicles. The situation quickly escalated from a routine inspection to an armed confrontation. According to authorities, one of the perpetrators fired several shots into the air before the situation escalated. Officers demanded they drop their weapons and surrender, but in response, they fired back at the officers. In the ensuing confrontation, one officer suffered a fatal gunshot wound to the head and died at the scene. His colleague was hit by multiple shots, including in the arm, leg, and chest, but managed to return fire. The return fire hit Meza Torres, who suffered critical injuries. Officers immediately rendered aid and secured the area. Several weapons and ammunition were found at the scene. Initial reports indicated a 9mm pistol used by Meza Torres, plus a .38 Super pistol believed to belong to Rojas Felix, along with magazines and bullets. After receiving the gunshots, Meza Torres was rushed to a private hospital. Medical personnel performed emergency measures, but his condition was extremely serious. Doctors reported that he suffered severe gunshot wounds and head trauma. Intensive intervention was performed, but his life could not be saved. The hospital pronounced him dead that morning at around 3:40 a.m. after medical treatment. Meanwhile, Rojas Felix attempted to flee the scene by climbing onto the roof of a nearby house. This escape attempt was unsuccessful. Additional officers who arrived quickly apprehended him and detained him for further questioning. The items seized at the scene later became evidence. 2 pistols, several magazines, and 22 rounds of ammunition were recorded in the police report. During the initial investigation, Rojas Felix mentioned a meeting a few days earlier with a figure considered influential in the Sinaloa cartel, Ignacio Coronel Villarreal. He claimed that the weapon used belonged to that individual. However, when asked to identify the location of the meeting or provide other details, his statements were vague and inconsistent. This case immediately attracted the attention of agencies dealing with organized crime. Initial documents and evidence were sent to a special investigation unit for further review. However, after submitting the files, authorities led by Cesar ultimately decided to discontinue several lines of inquiry related to alleged high-level connections within the cartel structure. The reasons for the halt were later officially disclosed by authorities. This shootout marked a swift end to Meza Torres' life. From a brief roadside confrontation to an incident that killed a police officer and ended the life of a young man just entering adulthood. After emergency treatment at a private hospital, medical personnel confirmed that Cesar Raúl Meza Torres died from gunshot wounds. Doctors noted a severe gunshot wound accompanied by multiple blunt force trauma to the head. A subsequent forensic report indicated that some of these blunt force injuries were likely caused by blows with the butt of a weapon. The body was then released to the family. The official handover was made to his aunt, Maria Luisa Torres Felix, and his sister, Adriana Meza Torres. The administrative and funeral arrangements were expedited as the family chose to transport the body to Culiacán that same day for family ceremonies. Back home, the family held a brief prayer and memorial service at a funeral home on Boulevard Emilio Zapata. The body lay in state at the home for 3 days. During this time, close relatives, family friends, and members of the community came to pay their respects and offer condolences. The atmosphere at the home was filled with the family's grief and the presence of well-known figures in the community. The funeral rites took place on April 29, 2010. The body was placed in a silver casket according to family records and taken to the agreed-upon burial site. The ceremony was relatively brief and attended by the immediate family and a few close acquaintances. Official records of the funeral procession note that there were no major public disturbances during the burial,
although the atmosphere remained tense due to the family's criminal background. The death of Cesar Raúl Meza Torres left an impact that has not entirely faded from the public sphere. Despite his young age, his legacy remains visible in various forms. From his photos circulating on social media to his narco corrido songs that have made him part of the popular narrative of cartel culture. For some in his community, he is seen as another example of a generation of young people trapped in a cycle of violence. For law enforcement, he serves as a reminder of how children of cartel families can enter the organizational structure at an early age and end up in deadly situations.